On the outskirts of Bisbee, Arizona, along Highway 80, in the middle of nowhere, a half mile off the road, stood an old home perched at the bottom of some cliffs. On the morning of March 25th, 1977, a wellness check was performed on the house at the request of an unnamed relative. What authorities discovered in the home and on the premises over the course of several weeks left several of the investigators traumatized, with one of them eventually resigning. Dozens of notebooks were found inside the home locked in a safe, except for one which was sitting on a desk, pencil still laying there, with the last sentence unfinished. Below the last sentence was one word scribbled in blood: Venganza. The notebooks contain gruesome details of what happened over several decades. The home belonged to 46-year-old Corey Hardy. The following is a first excerpt from the notebook with the earliest date: May 27th, 1956. I don't remember exactly when, but from a very young age I've had the irresistible urge to do bad things, dark things, which I knew would be who I am and would be my life. I'll never forget the first child I took, not long ago. I relive it in my mind almost daily as it was the most special one for me. I also have a special place for her in my Children of the Grave. It took place in Tucson, and I'd been on the hunt for a week for that one child that would become my first, C's, as I called it. After some searching, I found a quiet, out of the way elementary school that was far enough away from any police station and began watching the kids as they came out to play at recess. It didn't take long before I found my first C's. I knew fairly quickly she'd be the one. She would always sit by herself on the playground, away from the other kids. But more importantly, she'd walk to and from school, alone. I planned on taking her the following day as she walked to school. The streets were not busy in the mornings. I'd given thought to various ways of how to take her, but ultimately decided to just pull up alongside her, knock her out, and put her in the trunk of my car. I wanted it to go quickly and smoothly without her having a chance to run away. I had the perfect spot picked out as she walked to school. There was a stretch of road with no houses, and I could see far enough in either direction if cars would be coming. The morning I'd planned to take her had arrived, and I remember feeling an excitement unlike any other feeling I'd ever experienced in my entire life. As I watched her come out of her house, a surge of adrenaline went through me. It would only be a few minutes before she reached the stretch of road where I'd have my opportunity. As she got closer to the stretch with me slowly following behind her, I began frantically looking in both directions, making sure there weren't any cars approaching. As she got within a few feet of the exact spot I planned on taking her, I couldn't control my excitement. I remember the second she got to the spot. I sped up, slammed on my brakes, got out, ran over to her, and hit her on the head with the baseball bat I'd brought. This sent her tumbling to the ground. I hurriedly picked her up, popped the trunk, put her inside, and quickly shut it. I looked around for other cars, and luckily that day there were none in sight. It's as if it were fate. I had to stop myself from speeding as I raced home in anticipation of what I had planned next. It was about a 2 hour drive, and as I pulled onto the dirt road leading to my gate, I could hear her kicking the trunk and screaming to be let out. I grinned as I continued driving. I pulled the car around back so the trunk was closest to the cellar doors. As I popped the trunk, I could see she was curled up in the fetal position in the corner. I reached in, grabbing her by the hair as I pulled her out and dragged her down into the cellar. Once we were in the cellar, I threw her into the corner and took my position. I still hadn't fully decided what exactly I wanted to do to her next, so we sat there. We sat for hours as she pleaded with me to release her. As I looked into her eyes, I felt nothing. Once I knew what I was going to do to her, I grabbed the special pliers off the table I'd selected just for this and proceeded to walk towards her as she screamed out in horror. The notebooks contain gruesome details of what he did to each child after he abducted them. The following notes are from the notebook that was found on his desk leading up to March 25th. January 2nd, 1977. Last night, as I laid in bed passed out from smoking grass and drinking too much, I heard a loud bang that suddenly jolted me awake. Then the sound of footsteps and giggling coming from down in the kitchen. It scared me some, so I jumped up, grabbed the shotgun I keep next to my bed, and went down to see who it was. When I made it to the kitchen and flipped on the light switch, I noticed something on the floor. I knelt down to have a closer look and was startled to see what looked like muddy footprints on the vinyl. Footprints belonging to a child. That couldn't be. My nearest neighbor is miles away, and I have a locked fence that surrounds my property. I drank half a fifth of whiskey after dinner and I was still fairly drunk, so I shrugged it off and went back to bed. When I woke up, I'd remembered what had happened, so I got up and ran downstairs to check the kitchen floor. As I inspected the vinyl, I could see nothing. Must have been the whiskey and grass, I'd thought. January 15th, 1977. Last night I was sitting on the couch watching TV when I heard a loud repetitive knocking noise coming from one of the floorboards from the cellar area, which isn't too far from the living room. I stood up and turned, looking towards the area. The footprints and giggling from weeks before immediately flashed into my mind, and the hairs on my arms stood on end. I contemplated grabbing my shotgun, but it was upstairs. I thought, what could it possibly be, anyway? I stood there for a while as the knocking continued and couldn't believe it. I was actually starting to get scared. I slowly walked over to where the knocking was coming from and kicked the floor with my foot. The knocking abruptly stopped. I knew I needed to check the cellar to make sure someone wasn't down there. I went upstairs and grabbed my shotgun before doing so, as I was fully prepared to kill whoever was down there. I went out back to the cellar doors and swung them open. As I walked down the steps, I again heard giggling. I stopped and yelled out, "Who's there? I'll kill you." As I flipped on the light switch, I saw something in the back of the cellar quickly move out of sight behind some boxes. I raised the shotgun and began slowly walking towards the boxes. For the first time in my life, I started to feel fear. This was not something I'm accustomed to. When I made it to the boxes, I quickly moved around to the side of them, fully expecting to see someone there, but there was no one. I was about to turn around and go check the rest of the cellar when I saw something on the ground. I knelt down to get a better look when I was taken aback. There, on the ground, in the dirt, were the footprints of a child. I stood up and started backing away when out of the corner of my eye I saw movement on the far side of the cellar. I swung my shotgun around and fired off around in that direction. I quickly ran over to the area to see if I'd killed anything, but again, there was nothing. At that point, I was starting to wonder if I was truly losing my mind and thought I should lay off the grass and booze for a few weeks. February 7th, 1977. Yesterday evening around 6, I was sitting at my desk contemplating my next C's as March is approaching, when I heard someone whisper my name. It sounded like it was mere feet from behind me, so I immediately stood up and turned around, kicking back my chair as I did so. I yelled out, "Who is that?" as I stood there not knowing what to do. I heard my name whispered again. This time it sounded like it was coming from down the hallway. For the first time in my life, a chill went up my spine as I stood there, trembling in fear. Over the last few weeks, I'd tried forgetting the odd occurrences that had taken place and hadn't smoked grass or drank a drop since. Now I was sure something was amiss. Something strange was definitely happening to me. I slowly started walking towards the doorway so I could have a look down the hallway when I heard the sound of running footsteps. It sounded like it was more than just one person. As I turned the corner to look, I couldn't believe my eyes. There, at the end of the hallway, were several children standing in the doorway, glaring at me. I shouted out, "What are you kids doing in here? Who are you?" They giggled, turned, and ran into the room. I quickly grabbed my shotgun and ran down the hallway. As I was running, the strange thought that the kids seemed familiar went through my mind. I paused once I made it to the doorway and yelled out again, "Hey, you kids, come out of there. Trust me, you don't want to piss me off." There was nothing but silence, so I crept into the room, shotgun at the ready. I went through the entire room but found nothing. The window was still closed and locked, which meant they didn't escape through there. I wasn't sure what to do. I know what I saw and heard. I sat down on the floor of that room and stared at the wall for hours. Am I going crazy? Is someone messing with me? It's been 5 months since my last C's. Could that be it? I rolled every thought you can imagine through my mind but came up with no answers. February 23rd, 1977. Earlier today, I was down in the cellar preparing the items for my next C's, which I planned on doing on March 25th. After I bring a C's back here, I always do something different to each one. While I was setting up the equipment I was going to use, the cellar doors slammed shut. I jumped up and turned around. Right then, the light went out, and I heard what sounded like a small child behind me say my name. I was so frightened I started stumbling, tripped on something, and fell down. Something then grabbed me by the leg and started dragging me along the dirt floor. I screamed out, "What the hell is going on? Who are you?" I kicked to break free of their grasp, but couldn't. This concerned me as I'm 6'5" and 230 pounds. Without warning, whoever was dragging me let go. I jumped up, ran for the cellar doors, and flung them open. I tried turning on the light, but it wouldn't turn on. I stood there on the stairs using the light from the sun to see if I could see anything in the cellar, but there was nothing. Only the things I'd brought down. I went to my room and laid down the rest of the day. What happened in the cellar really messed with my mind. I didn't want to go back down there, but knew I had no choice. The desire to seize was too strong. I decided to take a few days off instead. March 15th, 1977. It's been quiet over the last few weeks. I was finally able to go down into the cellar and finish setting up things. The day I've been waiting for 5 months, is only 10 days away. I can barely contain my excitement. It's very late now as I'm writing this. Several weeks before the day, I can't sleep well, so I sit and write and relive past seasons in my mind. I never want to forget them. Wait, I think I just heard the kitchen door open. It now sounds like there's people walking through my kitchen. Venganza, scribbled in blood, was the final word written below his last sentence. Corey Hardy's body was found dismembered in his living room. His arms had been torn to shreds and were covered in what appeared to be claw marks. Authorities say he had his arms up in a defensive position as he was being attacked. Authorities found what he called the children of the grave. It was an area on his property containing the bodies of 23 children, ages ranging from 6 to 11. 30 years later, the blood from the last notebook was analyzed and was found not to be Corey Hardy's. The blood matched the DNA of his first victim. For more scary horror stories, please subscribe.